Hello and welcome to an episode that deals with qualities of a public relations officer. I'm Swati Singh, teaching as a guest lecturer at Delhi University and other colleges. I'm also working as a corporate trainer and a media consultant for various organizations. I have an experience of 11 years with media and 7 years in teaching at various North Indian universities. Objectives of this program are to chalk out the basic qualities required to be a great public relations officer, to understand the need to imbibe the qualities presented in the lecture, to make the best use of certain human skills in administering the day-to-day work to be done by a public relations officer. Public relations is a challenging profession which seeks to employ dynamic and flamboyant professionals. Since certain basic characteristics are required to be a successful public relations officer, the qualities we would be discussing in this episode would embark the very nature of public relations work, which defines the behavior put up by the public relations practitioner.
For a public relations professional, the skills required are difficult to enumerate, but some of the main ones I'll tell you, and that is what you should focus on building. One is understanding the environment. Do you read at least 6 newspapers a day? Do you watch at least 3 news television channels a day? And by the way, the color sections of papers don't count. The sports sections of papers don't count. So if you don't do that, start doing it now if you want a career in public relations. The third thing you have to do today is how much time do you spend browsing news sites? Again, looking at video games, looking at hacker sites does not count. Playing on Twitter does. Being on Facebook, as long as you're not looking at stupid pictures, does. Understanding what updates get a reaction does. But reading newspapers, watching news channels, remembering names and remembering approaches is one skill. Learn it, practice it, and do it every day. It can't happen overnight. If you do it for 3 months, that's too little. If you do it for 3 years, you're just a beginner. If you do it for about 10, you're somewhere on the road to being a professional.
Also, an understanding of the qualities would lead us to reason out the need and assess the way of harnessing the same for use to be an effective public relations officer. Communication is the lifeline of public relations. Therefore, a public relations officer is mandatorily believed to be good at communication skills. But before we comprehend the skills, let's understand what does communication imbibe for public relations profession. There are 2 main types of communication a public relation officer has to take up, which are verbal communication and non-verbal communication. Verbal communication emphasis is both on written and spoken skills of a public relations officer. Since a public relations professional has to meet several people in day and unlimited clients on a regular basis, he has to ensure that he not only has a command over his language, rather he should have the gift of taking into a heart of a person. Also, proposals, reports, letters, memos, etc. have to be prepared by a public relations person on day-to-day basis, which inherently means that he should know the format of the given subject and should be familiar with the vocabulary and grammar for effectively expressing the message. It is believed that if a public relations officer has great command over his language, he has crossed the barriers of getting across his message to the concerned party.
The second skill is the ability to write in any language. So it's not about saying in an interview, oh, I want to be a PR person because I like meeting people. Public relations is not about meeting people. Public relations is not about meeting new people either. That is the one skill that we don't look for. Public relations is the ability to write well, to get your spelling right, to get your grammar right, to get your themes right, and it doesn't matter whether you write in Hindi, in Swahili, or in English. I'm not concerned. but can you write well? Along with writing is now the skill of being able to think visually. So, thinking visually doesn't mean going out and trying to make a film. It's great if you can, but I bet most of you can't. But at least understanding what is it that makes for a riveting visual, whether it's video or still. So, writing, thinking visually, and thinking thereafter digitally. Thinking in 140 characters. Can you do that? If you can't, you don't write well enough for me. Spelling is very important. Only those who can spell correctly have the liberty of being able to compress words when needed digitally. So if you don't have spelling, don't think that your spelling error is digital spelling. So whatever you do, these are the two basic skills. Without these building blocks, forget a career in public relations.
When we talk about the usage of communication non-verbally, we are emphasizing on communication skills of a public relation officer, which should be in tune with the organizational communication needs. As per a research, it has been found out that body language plays 65% role out of 100% communication in expressing a message. This invariably emulates that the public relations personnel should use such kinesics or body language which would be able to persuade and convince the person they're communicating with. Also, we have to understand that if any wrong signals go out to the other party, he might be offended or be unwilling to strike a conversation and inherently deny a long-term relationship with the public relations firm, officers, organization. The aforesaid action would be undesirable and damaging. Therefore, a careful and calculated way of using both verbal and non-verbal communication as per people and situation has to be tackled by the public relations officer. Handling people is also one of the most complex works which a human being has to follow, because people are most unpredictable creatures on this planet. We shall now take a look at basic qualities required in a public relation officer.
Also, someone who understands how other people think. What will the public react like, and who is the public? So, a preliminary understanding of the psychology of audiences, defining audiences as consumers, as employees, as shareholders, as the government, as NGOs. Think of any one audience and understand what makes them think a particular way. Can you figure it out? If you can't, take a class in psychology. That's better than taking a class in French or in literature. It won't work. But understand how a group of people think. Because in public relations, the most important function that you perform is influencing how audiences think. If you don't understand how they think, you can't understand how to make them think in the way you want them to think. So the ability to understand groupthink is one of the skills that you need in public relations. Therefore, you need to either learn it or have it. Some people have it, some people need to be taught it.
It is rather important for a public relations officer to keep up his work slowly and steadily. For they say, slow and steady wins the race, which is an obvious technique for public relations. Here, we harp on the term sustenance and persistence in image building. This specifically refers to continuous effort being put in by the public relation officer to ensure that he builds a positive image of the organization, client, or corporate in the mind of the audiences. Patience is a virtue. It is said everybody needs patience at every juncture of life. The belief is that patience doesn't come as a commodity and is required tremendously by any public relations officer, for the simple reason that the situations, people, and circumstances dealt by the public relation officer often require to be done with maturity. Due to the complexity of situations a public relation officer deals is to be positively done and patiently involved. Therefore, it stands as one of the most important quality to be imbibed by a public relations officer to be effective. A public relation officer needs to deal with different topics on day-to-day basis with various organizations and different clients. The need is to be up to date with all sorts of information, national, international, regional or local. He is required to go through his regular dose of newspapers, television, news channels, internet surfing for finding new information, and also read loads of books and magazines to keep up with his overall knowledge and intellect. Quick decisions are to be taken, which are complicated and at times come with lots of risks. A public relation officer should be intuitive and have a great presence of mind, which enables him to take quick decisions. Not only quick, the decisions to be taken have to be correct and logical, since one decision can change the entire situation or can create a different scenario for any institution, person, or organization's reputation. Especially during the time of crisis, presence of mind is the greatest asset a public relations officer should use and at the same time possess.
The fourth skill that I would say is critical is the ability to react quickly. So if you take all day to come up with a smart answer, or if you think about the right answer the day after, it won't work. So speed of thinking and clarity of thinking. Speed and clarity combined is the kind of quality that a public relations person needs, because the public relations world is very rapidly shifting every minute. So you need that skill. And the last one, and I'll just stop at this skill only because there are too many skills that are needed in the basic skills of a public relations person. The last one is the skill to work hard every day, to recognize that there is no limit to the world in which you work, which is 24/7. When the markets open in Tokyo, the markets shut in London. When the markets open in Delhi, the markets shut in Chicago. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. The fact is 24/7 into 365 days is the basic core life of a public relations professional.
A public relations officer has to be a born leader. And if this is not the case, leadership qualities can be imbibed with practice. They say great leaders walk the talk. This preceptually talks about a public relation officer's ability to do what he says. Also, when any new scheme or a difficult situation has to be handled, a public relation officer should display enthusiasm and courage. He should also look confident of working on the assignment. The zeal with which he takes up the project would in a way ensure that the participation of the rest of the employees is up to date and to the mark. He should not only lead, rather, he should also support the employees and his team in the organization in all circumstances. The spirit of never say die instills high level of excitement and commitment in those who would follow him for all times to come. To be honest to the internal and external audiences, and to be able to deliver the deliverables is not just a prerequisite, but in a way mandatory for the public relations officer. Integrity is derived from the level of commitment that a public relation officer displays in his behavior and day-to-day work. Respect for self and respect for others is the core value attached to integrity. The idea is to give the other person faith that the promises being given by the organization would be fulfilled. This message comes from the public relation officer time and again. The message is not just a verbal assurance, rather, it's depicted in the working pattern and is displayed time to time of fulfillment of the work said and done by the public relation officer on behalf of the organization. Integrity as a virtue goes a long way in cultivating high level of trust and mutual understanding between an organization and its public. A public relation officer has to work with many sorts of people, both internally and externally. These people would come with their own mindsets, perceptions, backgrounds, and experiences. The key for a public relation officer to be a team player is to accept and to be flexible at the same time. Working with the entire staff is to be distributed evenly and based on the ability of each team player. A PRO has to ensure that he makes each department in the organization does its work meticulously and properly. By getting feedback and participating directly or indirectly in their working, a public relation officer ensures great teamwork which takes an organization to great heights in the long run. Since in most of the organizations, the public relation officer deals with the chairman or the managing director one on one, yet it does not give him a reason to be high headed. In fact, a public relation officer is expected to be a people's person. He has to ensure that right from the peon of the company to the managing director, everybody feels at ease with him, sharing information and problems on one basis. His exterior should be calm and warm and approachable. These are wonderful human qualities which project the public relation officer to be a good human being and at the same time a great professional. A public relation officer is the face of any organization. It is mandatory that the company provides all possible information about their working, history, issues, policies, procedures, and background to the public relation officer. He should be well informed, otherwise, it would become difficult for him to handle the problems of any organizations at any given time. In fact, no information should be perpetually hidden from him. At the same time, it also becomes the responsibility of the public relation officer to inquire about any information he requires for certain task or a problem at hand. Also, when we talk about handling the organization's publicity and promotions, a public relation officer needs to have every possible information with him for the same. Knowledge is power stands true in all situations pertaining to the public relations officer. It's not about just throwing parties or meeting people every day. Rather, some of the most important socializing a public relation officer has to do is to maintain a decent diary of birthdays, anniversaries, and important dates pertaining to his client's interest. His contact directory should be up to date and he should have updated yellow pages, for he would need to talk to various vendors for arrangements of various events for the organization. The need of contacts these days in form of emails, etc. is also there for sending e-cards or messages to the various audiences on various occasions. All this is a day's work for any public relation officer who maintains great personal and professional equation with all his internal and external audiences. To basically be a good human being and be genuine in helping out people who needs his help, a public relation officer has to be very social. He has to work for a given client or an organization, which would be invariably honest. That particular person or institution has to feel that. But at the same time, social welfare here comes out of community service. While we discuss about corporate social responsibility, it becomes rather the duty of the public relations officer to arrange and organize various events which might be of great help to the community the organization caters to. This kind of social welfare goes out for both the internal and external audiences. Since public relation officer deals with all sorts of people from different walks of life, a deeper understanding of human psychology and extraordinary social networking skills need to be deployed to cast a long-lasting impression. The idea here is to create a backup plan. It is said that for every situation, a public relation officer should arrange for 2 or 3 alternatives. Let's say a press conference has to be arranged. Here, a public relation officer should be smart enough to arrange for more than 3 to 4 food vendors, take quotations from them, check their menu cards, and also ensure that no one goofs up on the amount of food or the quality of services that have been assured. The aforesaid is just one of the examples of networking. There are very many examples for every arrangement that has to be made prior to many such occasions and events, for which a public relation officer should be ever prepared with sound networking skills and a great contact diary. A public relation officer needs to be not the best looking person around, but in order to come across as a decent, smart, and reliable person, he has to look classy. His sense of dressing from top to bottom should be neat and clean. For men, it is necessary to shave, put on a decent perfume, wear sober colors, and dress up formally. Public relations is a formal profession which believes in corporate dressing. Therefore, trousers with crisp collared shirts are mostly preferred. Whereas for females, the dressing could vary from corporate suits to salwar suits and saris. Also, a neat bun and light makeup are some basic requirements for the female staff. A cluttered life and a cluttered working pattern are both the biggest negative things for any professional. But for public relation officers, it's an absolutely no-no. Files and fact sheets should be very well compartmentalized. Also, a public relation officer should be in a habit of record keeping. Since a lot of paperwork has to be carried on daily basis, there is an overwhelming requirement of lots of stationery and soft copies to be compiled daily. The demand of a public relations profession is of getting the right file at the right time to the right client on the right desk, which has to be fulfilled come what may. Grapevine and rumors. Since rumors are highly dangerous and damaging to the image of any organization, the public relation officer has to understand the responsibility he has to handle and control this kind of damaging communication for his organization. For this particular purpose, many a times the public relation officer befriends the insiders, certain employees, and outsiders, that is, customers, shareholders, government employees, media, to provide them with significant data in time. This helps him in getting the right information and at times inside information which saves his organization from a lot of intentional damage. A public relation officer should keep his eyes and ears open and not developments in the organization which might be positive or negative. He needs to be always watching out for troublemakers, that is, people of union, opinion leaders, competitors, etc., and also should befriend them at the same time. This makes his job easy and simpler. Public relations is a day-to-day challenge. Once a public relation officer works with an agency, it becomes all the more important for him to ensure that all the clients or accounts he handles are given the required work on time committed to them. Most of the work is done under extreme pressure and at crisp deadlines. But then, a public relation officer should not shirk his responsibility and keep his calm. Use his presence of mind to deal with situations of this sort and deliver absolutely on time. Performing well under pressure helps, especially because one never knows which assignment would be allotted to him or her at what given time and is required when, with which deadline. A constant pressure and run keeps the public relation officer on his toes and tests his patience. But then, no gain without pay. And once a public relation officer get hooked to the art of delivering on time, it pays to him for a lifetime. To sum up, let's understand that all the aforesaid qualities are possibly not the only or the ultimate qualities of a public relation officer who possesses them, for this list is exhaustive. But certain basic important qualities have to be showcased for the student's understanding. And now it is time for a quick recap. We have come to understand that a public relation officer has to be diligent, hardworking, intellectual, caring, genuine, organized, well informed, well kept, etc. The purpose of possessing the above qualities is not only to become more familiar and effective for the profession of public relations, but at the same time, proving to be an individual who stands up to certain basic standards and principles of life for himself and the world at large. But as already stated, these qualities mentioned are just a glimpse of the basic requirements to be a great public relations officer. However, the list is exhaustive, as we've already said, and would be certainly discovered once the individual starts working in this profession for some time. I hope you really enjoyed this lecture. Thank you and goodbye.